Recorded at the WNDU 16 News Now studios, this is the South Bend Tribune's Pot of Gold Notre Dame Football Podcast. Here are your hosts, columnist Tom Noy, Notre Dame football beat writer Mike Berardino, and WNDU's Jackson Neal.
I am Tom Noy. The shiny, happy people over there is Mike Berardino, and the best dressed of them all is Jackson Neal. And this is the Pot of Gold Game Week. You know how I know it's a game week? This is what I've done for the last couple hours. On my way to Notre Dame, they're unloading more porta potties.
I saw that
at Notre Dame Stadium.
I saw that.
Telltale sign. There's a game here on Friday. And then, as we were making our way, all three of us were at the Pete Bavacqua introductory press conference with Pete Bavacqua. Starts July 1st, meets the media on December 17th. So we were all at the Pete Bavacqua press conference at Notre Dame Stadium. And driving down Angela Boulevard, I passed not one, not two, not three or four, but 5 18-wheeler production trucks for ESPN and College Game Day. So it's a game week, and not just another game week. It is the first ever college football playoff game. Number 7 Notre Dame at 11-1 will host number 10 Indiana, also at 11-1. 8 o'clock-ish, I'd say more like maybe 8:10, 8:15. Friday night from chilly Notre Dame Stadium. Gentlemen?
I'm starting to feel it. I'm starting to feel the excitement kind of
Are
feeling.
ya?
Yeah, I'm feeling it. I don't know. At least being around our newsroom, everyone's talking about it. It's
You just taped a little on-field intro or something.
Taped a little on-field.
We had to start late because you had to go hit the field.
You know, that's why. But the best dressed right there.
Yes. So yeah, it's hard to feel it now because Notre Dame started the week on Sunday. They wanted to keep their usual game week routine. So we had Marcus Freeman on Sunday. We had 10 players on Sunday. And I have absolutely no idea what day it is today.
It feels weird.
It feels like a Wednesday, but it's really a Tuesday. The whole week has been screwed up with Notre Dame's media access, and everything that we did on Sunday felt like Monday. My daughter came home from school on Monday, and I said, "You can take my car to work if you want." She said, "It's only Monday. It's not Tuesday." So I have no idea. I think it's Tuesday. Right now it's 1:19 on Tuesday afternoon. Yes. We'll get into Notre Dame and IU. Of course, it's Notre Dame and IU, so Notre Dame on NBC comes full circle because the first ever home game for Notre Dame on NBC was 1991. That game was against Indiana. The first ever Notre Dame home game now, not on NBC since then, in 2024, and also Indiana. So if you talk Indiana, you have to start with Curtis Rourke, the quarterback. Talking with Al Golden and some of the defensive players earlier this week, he knows where to go with the ball. He knows what to do with it. He'll execute. It comes out of his hand fast. He knows where he wants to go, and he's not going to put it on the ground. So that's going to be a rather interesting matchup, as will be the Indiana run defense, which is number 1 in the country, allowing only 70.8 yards per game. So Riley Leonard, Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love. Might be tough sledding for them on Friday night, regardless of what the weather is going to be like.
It's going, yeah, I mean, I don't think Notre Dame's going to, regardless of the weather, do anything to reinvent the wheel. Jeremiah Love, the little look we had for about 25 minutes outdoors, seemed to be spry. And
he seemed to be spry, but did you notice the knee brace? Did you see the knee brace?
No.
He's got a knee brace on his right leg. Yeah. You could. He wore leg sleeves, and then as he was doing in whatever video I saw of him, you could see that there was a brace underneath the leg sleeve. So spry, probably not 100%, but hell, it's December. Who really is 100%? Mm-hmm.
You're the fellow who wrote that they don't come up those 31 steps without being healthy.
Exactly.
Was one of the 10.
He was one of the 10. I was shocked that he was one of the 10, and I was also pleasantly surprised because when we were sitting there listening to Marcus Freeman on Sunday, and he started out with Howard Cross, there was a little pause there, and I was expecting him to say, will not be available.
Or questionable or something.
Yeah, is questionable.
So Love is going to get the ball, and Price will get the ball when Love takes a break. And will Love be hurdling? I don't know. I think we may have seen the last of the hurdling this year. But his general mood and spirit was good in his interaction with the media. He's even.
How many times did he say shoot?
Yeah, I don't have the official number for you, but he's tamped that down. That's part of the growth.
That is after Purdue.
He could not stop saying it.
And I think it got to the point in the post game where he was just saying it.
No, I think it was one of those things where you say, "Don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, shoot,"
and then you think about it. But it was
because Dylan McCullough says it a lot in all their meetings. It's one of his go-to time buyers. So, but he's pulled that back. But no, this offensive line. It has been able to impose its will on at a number of times in this 10-game winning streak. But this is the best run defense they'll have faced since A&M, I guess. And because you didn't know what A&M was going to be. More about the pass rush in A&M than the run defense. But that was a front seven that was formidable. And here's Indiana having done it against a schedule that is Big Ten in name, but they missed some of the biggies.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame has a 10-game winning streak that's impressive against any competition, but they missed some of the biggies, and some of the biggies that were supposed to be were brutal or generally mediocre.
Florida State.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
USC
at best, mediocre. But
right.
and as you've written, and people are worried, it's in terms of flip the side of the ball now that the best pass efficiency defense for the past 2 years is back in prove it to me mode, a rare mode for that group. Because I use the most efficient pass offense. But the weather may really change that thing. And that's where if it's freezing, sub-freezing temperatures, even if they're just the snow or no snow, sub-freezing, grip on the ball, all that, some of the best plays that could be called on either side would be QB run. And Notre Dame has the advantage in that because Curtis Rourke had his own knee injury a couple years ago and doesn't run as much.
There's a quick 6-7 minutes on IU. Now we'll get to some of the also more important things. Like Mike just said, the weather. What's going to happen on Friday? Here is the updated weather forecast. Mike's like, no idea. Like weather forecaster. Don't you have, Jackson, don't you have like 6 weather people on staff here?
I think it's 5. But yeah, we have plenty of weather people. And
who's the most accurate usually?
I can't say that.
Is there a scoreboard?
There should be. There absolutely should be because they all have that certification. But we want the PFF Pro Football Focus grade for accuracy for the weather forecasters because that's what people need to know.
Yeah, so you want some advanced stats in our weather forecasters.
Yes.
What do the metrics say?
Right now, their metrics, at least they're saying for Friday night, it's going to be, they're saying some snow, or like going to be below freezing, but they have been pretty accurate, if I have to say so myself.
Weather, Friday, light snow, precipitation chances, 35%, humidity, 76%, winds, 11 miles an hour, 32 degrees at kickoff or around kickoff, probably falling to around 23. So, all in all, perfect football weather for South Bend, Indiana on December 20th.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I saw that forecast. And, at least some snow. Whenever I think about this home playoff game, as soon as I know about the schedule, that there could be a home playoff game, you always have to be thinking about snow. So the fact that there's going to be, hopefully, at least a little bbit, that's going to make for a great environment. People
want to know about the weather. They also want to know about tickets. And it was interesting listening to Pete Bavacqua earlier today. Every Notre Dame student that wants to go to this football game on Friday night will be able to go. And the get-in price for a Notre Dame student to the first ever college football playoff game at Notre Dame Stadium?
$25.
$25. That's a hell of a deal.
Well, they want it to be loud. It best be loud at those prices.
Yeah, I was going to say
in that region of the stadium.
Seats on SeatGeek.com. They're starting at $388 a piece right now, going up to anywhere from. Let me see what the highest is on SeatGeek. 2 rows behind the Notre Dame Stadium or Notre Dame bench, $1,173 for one ticket. And on
$2,000 after fees?
Yeah, probably about $2,500. StubHub.com, Indiana, Notre Dame. Let's see tickets on StubHub. 2 seats together, starting at $449. So the get-in price still a little pricey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from what I've seen from the other games as well, I think especially was SMU Penn State that was below $100. I want to say this has been. I mean, it's not as high as it was when it first was announced. It was like over 1,000, but this is still looks like consistently the hardest ticket to get in this first round.
Series history: Notre Dame leads the all-time series 23-5-1. They're 13-1-1 at home. Last meeting we mentioned earlier in the pod, Notre Dame beats Indiana 49-27 in 1991. First game ever televised on NBC. First Notre Dame home game televised on NBC. Last IU win, 1950, 20-7 in Bloomington. And the first meeting, none of us, even Mike, will not remember this one. 1898.
Where was Mike?
The Irish.
We're going to look that up.
The Irish give up a couple of grand slams and a 2-run homer, and they lose 11-5. So that was the first meeting, but the weirdest meeting in this series. 1907, 0-0.
Why is it so weird? Scoreless tie back then.
Because it was 0-0.
They had scoreless tie at Army in Yankee Stadium, 1946. Nothing so unusual back then. They had no overtime.
No, they didn't.
And they had
no 2-point
They had no
conversion.
face masks.
Did they have Did they have a leather football?
Don't know what it was made of, Ben. It might have been cowhide, but pigskin, whatever. But it was, and of course, they had mud more than likely that day. No mud. There'll be no mud. This field's plastic, and that's good. So it's. I wanted to look up real quick, but I can't. But I'm going to imagine some aviation school or dental schools who Notre Dame played the following week after 1898.
Chicago surgeons and
Yeah, just one of those dudes.
Maybe Great Lakes Naval
Mishawaka High
Training
School.
Academy. We got Great Lakes Training Naval Training Academy coming later in the show. So, all right, I went 11 minutes and totally screwed this whole thing up. If we could start it over, I would, because we absolutely buried the lead as to, this is the first Notre Dame football home playoff game, the first CFP playoff game. But big news coming out of Notre Dame on Sunday night, the fact that Marcus Freeman signs a contract extension, announced on NBC, announced on NBC's NFL show that Sunday night. 6 more years of Marcus Freeman. That means they add 3 additional years to the 3 years that he had left on his contract. Will make him one of the highest paid coaches in college football. Of course, Notre Dame's not going to release exact numbers. You can probably guess anywhere between $9 and $10 million on Marcus Freeman. He will be the next head coach at the University of Notre Dame through 2030. The big question is, everybody knew this was coming. Pete Pavakwa said earlier today it had been on his mind from the start of the season to get this thing taken care of as soon as he can. Big question is, why now?
I mean, I think because of the playoff, making it this far and seeing that there's the possibility now for an actual run through these playoffs. I think if you look at a lot of experts, if you just look at the bracket, there is a legitimate path for Notre Dame to make a run pretty deep into this postseason. And if they do that, the price is only going to go up. And also, he was asked about this today, the NFL, other colleges.
The Chicago Bears are coming for Marcus Freeman.
Could another place come calling? That's, I think, another thing you have to think about.
How about not another place, Jackson? How about one place comes calling? Because let's say it goes sideways about 4 hours east of us here in Columbus, Ohio on Saturday night, and Ryan Day decides, you know what, I've had it with all this aggravation of being the head coach at Ohio State. I'm going to either resign and take a year off, or I'm going to explore the NFL. I think Marcus Freeman would be the number one call for Ohio State at this point. Now, not so much.
Well, there'd be a substantial buyout in there, but there's not and any sort of escape clause. Of course, I don't think Lou Holtz really ever had that Notre Dame escape clause from Minnesota that people always talked about. But Pete Pavakwa, right up there, like you said, for no carve out. No carve out for NFL opportunities or other, escape clause basically for any other college. But if the going rate out there tends to be about 90% of the remaining value, that's why Brian Kelly still has a job. That's why a few other coaches out there are not in a buyout mode or not really gettable for the NFL if it wants to go back into a college level, which has been hit and miss through the years. Jim Harbaugh had already been there. And 90% of what figures to be, if our math is correct. And remember, Kelly's, I believe, his 9.5 a year was the average on that 10-year deal. pretty good chance that Marcus Freeman's right in that range, 9.5-ish. And if that's the case, you got about 6 years and about $57 million left. So you're talking about 90% of that being a buyout. I'm just spitballing, and it might be around $52 million remaining. So if you want him, NFL, if you want him, Mark Davis, crazy man of Las Vegas.
Run far away from Mark Davis.
Nice stadium.
If Mark Davis, if
Michael
Jerry
Mayer.
Jones, if Shad Khan for the Jackson, any of those things, if the McCaskey family, even the McCaskey family, if any of those teams call, run far away from any of those.
That's
because
good
those
personal
are so
advice.
dysfunctional.
That's good personal advice. But would they want to? Would any of them be willing to pay? Let's say Notre Dame wins the national title, and Marcus gets all that additional month of media. We know how good he is in front of the camera. There's a lot of these owners who are like, I want somebody that I can, sell, that I can. All my sponsors will get behind. I'm not saying it happens like whiplash, but this is it's every year it'll be a question. And when you're talking about a league where the range of franchise values is something like from 10 billion all the way like the worst one's still 4 or something. What's another 50 million between friends? And so Marcus Freeman is very happy here, no doubt about it. His family, the fit is really good. I don't know that. Yes, I think that in timing, yes, it made a lot of sense. They had a chance to catch their breath. Much of this was being done with Clint Dowdle, the agent, and between 3 weeks between the USC game and this playoff game. So that was the opportunity. That was the window. They certainly had the parameters probably from the minute Pete Bavacqua got to know him a little bit. But the NFL is, you can't say that Marcus Freeman is here till through 2030 automatically, because as his star continues to rise and as he checks off a box, I have a hard time believing he'd leave here on the verge of a championship without having completed it. But if this is the year and they complete it, or it's next year or the year after, this is a man who's got unfinished business in the NFL because his body betrayed him. He couldn't play in the NFL and star the way he did at Ohio State. He said several times, I don't know what the NFL will be like. And I was only there for a year, mainly practice squads. He wouldn't have gone on that fact-finding tour of 5 different NFL camps in May if he didn't have a little intrigue about how it works there. Not saying he had one foot out the door, but he wants to bring it. He has brought, and if I asked the question the other day in terms of Bill Belichick, everybody falling all over themselves to say, oh, finally college football's got somebody who's going to run it like an NFL program and prepare them for the NFL. In those terms, with those schemes. Notre Dame been doing that. That's why all these NFL dads send their kids here already. So
kind of, sort of, though. Charlie Weiss walked in the door here saying he was going to run it like an NFL franchise, and he was going to trot out his Super Bowl rings and say, if you want to play on Sundays, you come with and play for me. Except he didn't know how to coach. He didn't know how to run a college program. All he said was, look at these Super Bowl rings. Yeah. I have a decided schematic advantage. Come play for me at the University of Notre Dame, and I'll get you to the NFL. And we saw how that worked.
The offense was good. It
was good, but the defense wasn't.
Yeah.
And some of the coaching decisions weren't, and it didn't work out for him.
So, it's not enough to just put the rings on the table. And Belichick has 8 of them if you count the 2 years with the Giants. They seem to be counting those at North Carolina. But record without Tom Brady, not so good.
Nope.
Last postseason win for Bill Belichick is the Super Bowl in 2019 after the 2018 season. That's a while ago, and I think I tweeted this. Maybe I just texted it to someone. But the idea that a lot of the recruits that he's going to be going after, even in this 2026 cycle, were like 10 or 11 years old when that game was played.
Yeah. They'll be like, huh?
No.
What?
Marcus Freeman on line 1, Bill Belichick on line 2. Which call is that kid taking?
Who's that old guy? I want to go with the young hip.
They weren't even
Marcus
born for the first part of the dynasty.
Sure.
These kids.
But I'm just saying, just since forget Super Bowl win, that's what it was. He hasn't won a postseason game since the Rams Super Bowl that was dreadfully awful. That was an awful game to watch, as I recall. But Belichick, no, I mean, the name is going to be, it's flashy, and Notre Dame's well positioned. So all that to say that an entity where the $10 billion and only going higher, whatever the Cowboys are worth today, it's only going higher no matter how much they lose. There'll always be somebody willing to throw 90% of the remaining value at Notre Dame just for the chance to steal this guy away. So, that's, sorry, Notre Dame fans, but that's something you'll have to monitor through the decade.
Hey, Jackson, let's go to our guest spotlight. Guest spotlight, Bloomington Herald-Times. We're talking IU. We're talking Notre Dame football. Michael Nizilik.
Nizilik. Nobody beats the Niz. I've been waiting to say that.
There you go.
All right.
I didn't get the dress code though. I'm
okay.
impressed.
Again, we have to. We go through this every week because everybody comes on wearing a hoodie or a sweatshirt.
It's all right.
Because we're doing this at the WNDU studios, we do our TV segment right after we're done here. So we have to do shirts and ties. We try to look as well dressed as Jackson in the coat as well. So that's why we have the ties. It's not to upstage our guest or anything. So
well, you guys look sharp. So.
We could put it on pause in like 5 minutes. You can go throw a tie on. All right. Easiest question, most obvious question. How in the world is Indiana 11-1, ranked the number one or ranked 10th in the CFP, and coming up to Notre Dame Stadium on Friday to play a first-round CFP playoff game after being the losingest program in FBS history?
Yeah, I mean, Kurt Cignetti has a lot to do with it. His blueprint, his coaching philosophy, the way he built this roster. He made essentially a promise, basically, that they were going to win some games. When he took the job back in December at his first press conference, he's like, I don't lose, guys. He was right. He's never had a losing season as a head coach. He assembled a really good core group of talent, brought over a lot of JMU guys. And then, in the transfer portal, focused on guys that had multiple years of production. And so this was not a veteran group that had played together, but a veteran group. And so, the schedule played a part. You can't deny that this all set up, the runway was there for them, but this team ran with it and just kind of the perfect mixture, I think, of for this team.
Kurt Cignetti was confident when he walked in on that campus, talking about how Purdue sucks and Michigan sucks. But when did you, as the beat writer, get the sense that, this team's got something different about them? And I don't know if they're going to go 11-1, but they have a chance to be really good and be so much better than what they've been for the last 3, 4, 5 seasons.
Yeah, I think locally the thought was that this team is probably a bowl team no matter what, just because of how, that non-conference schedule was probably the worst in the country. I mean, you can't sugarcoat it. Western Illinois had lost 25 games or 24 games before coming in here. So, you had 3 wins. Not so hard to see them getting to 6. But I think when you saw them, you kind of raised the bar, like 8, 9. The win at UCLA, I think, was certainly notable, just with the way they went in there. You saw a lot of teams through that first month and a half of the season really struggle with those West Coast trips if you were in the East Coast time zone. Indiana didn't. And then I think, obviously, that Nebraska game was sort of probably your turning point moment coming out of a bye, and they just, everybody was like, Nebraska's back, and then they blew the doors off that game, and Nebraska didn't look competitive for 1 minute. It was just it was all Indiana. And so I think that's when you said, look, this team's really got a chance to do something that's never been done before, and they did. Won double-digit games. That's never happened. And so I think that's kind of when you really started raising the bar. But I think the baseline for success here was bowl game to begin with, just because, like I said, that schedule, the talent they assembled, but they really, I think, in the second half of the season proved that they belonged in a different category of team.
Niz, we were talking to Howard Cross this week, and he used a term, I believe it was interconnected discipline, and he said Indiana shows that because so many of those guys, even though they were transfers, so many were from JMU. So he likened it to the way Notre Dame's front had to prepare for Army and Navy in terms of efficiency and every movement. Let's restrict it right now, just I guess to what Cross was talking about, the offense of Indiana he was facing. How amazing is that? How rare must that be? And how for that many newcomers to have that level of discipline? And is that something you've noticed game to game in terms of even, I know the metrics love everything about Indiana this year, but Just right down to way they respond to adversity. There's guys that have been through it before, albeit at a smaller school.
Yeah, I think it's different things on the different sides of the ball. I think on defense, like you mentioned, that they do have a core group. I think it's like 7 JMU guys that have played together and came over together. So that core is there, and then they have they had defensive coordinator Brian Haynes that they brought over. So all that kind of came over. He's throwing more at them, allowing them. I think Marcus Freeman talked about their stunts and twists up front. A lot more of that this year because he trusts them more. So they had that built-in rapport. So I think that's what explains that interconnectedness on defense. On offense, a lot less kind of, there is a core group of JMU guys, but offensive line, there's a couple of returners in there, other transfers, wide receivers is kind of a mishmash. And so I think what it is more of a clear philosophy from the head coach down. This is Curt Cignetti's system. Brought in Mike Shanahan, they've worked together for, I think, almost a decade. And then Tino Sansari, who's, leaving after this season. But that core philosophy kind of from Cignetti down, a vision, and I think that's what helps sort of like mold this offense to be a disciplined group because they know this system inside and out, and I just think they have a way of teaching it that helps them sort of hit the ground running because they've done it at every stop. Curt Cignetti did it at Elon when he took over. He did it at James Madison. So you've seen them not really have a sort of learning period, I guess you could say, when they take over a new job on offense. It's like off to the races. And so I think that's more part of it. The talent's a little more sort of a collection from different places on offense, but it's that vision Cignetti has. He just knows, Mike Shanahan and him know how to put this offense in place and sort of get it rolling.
And then when you look for Indiana this season, you mentioned the schedule wasn't the toughest schedule, but that Ohio State game, the one loss on the year, that was the game everyone was kind of looking at for this IU team. What did you see in that loss for the Hoosiers? And maybe if they got exposed a little bit in certain things, what they did well in that game, what was your takeaway from that matchup?
Yeah, well, I think there were 2 special teams mistakes that were uncharacteristic that sort of were worth 14 points right on top. And I think when you sort of I think that has to be mentioned up front. Like they just made some uncharacteristic mistakes and on special teams that they hadn't all season long. And then I think, Curt Cignetti's talked a lot about it. He said it's the biggest lesson he's learned this year. The noise impacted them to a degree that they didn't expect. They went to a silent count, and essentially Ohio State was reading it and jumping the snap, basically. The motion that they caught onto it. Indiana just didn't do a very good job of it. And Curt Cignetti, I think, has mentioned it at every press conference he's had since then. I think he's upset with himself, upset that they didn't kind of meet the moment. But I don't think it was about talent. And I think they stood sort of tall. That it was a close game through basically the first half. And so it wasn't a case of where, Ohio State, blew the game out and proved that they were frauds or anything like that. I think it was a closer game than the final score says. And it was just sort of on the margins that they made some mistakes that they want back. And I think that's going to motivate them this week, certainly, to sort of say, like, look, we're not going to do the same things, not going to drop a snap on a punt, or not going to, have the defense tee off on Curtis Rourke because they're reading our snap count.
How much has that loss lingered? Because it was the second to last game in the season, and then they wind up playing Purdue, and we saw what Purdue was. They beat Purdue 66-0 at home. So this is the first time they go back on the road since Ohio State. In the back of their minds, are they thinking, we can't let this happen again, or we're going to be better for what we went through in Columbus?
Well, I think you saw, and that it didn't linger because they could have run up the score, I think, to 100 on Purdue. To be honest, that was quite something.
The four of us and 7 other guys could probably score 10 points on Purdue.
So it didn't linger, but I think it's more motivation. The idea that look, they've heard it. They heard it that whole sort of 2 weeks about this. Everybody talked about Indiana in terms of the college football playoff picture. That like this is the team that doesn't belong, or this is the team that has the most holes, or why aren't we talking about Alabama over them and things like that. And so I think they heard those things that the loss to Ohio State. They want to prove that it was an anomaly. They want to prove that they can beat sort of this top tier competition. I mean, look, I thought Michigan had as good of a defense in the country this season, so I don't think you could say they don't have any wins, because I thought Michigan's defense was even better than Ohio State's. But at the same time, look, they know what the narrative was about this team, and the only way they're going to change it is if they get that win in the first round. People will say, like, oh, nice Cinderella story, one and done if they lose this. If they win it, you'll get to Sugar Bowl, play Georgia. I think it'll mean something to these players that, like, look, we did belong, and we proved it.
So a couple of years ago, when Purdue came here, there was a big story that they weren't allowed to bring, Notre Dame did not allow them to bring their big bass drum into the stadium. It was like a hazard. And I was just wondering, has Indiana been alerted yet if Kurt Cignetti's chip, that big chip on his shoulder that he wears on behalf of the entire team and carries around his whole life, will he be allowed to bring that into the stadium? And if he does bring it into the stadium, is that a game changer?
Does it fit through the tunnel? If it fits through the tunnel, it's good.
I think if they told him no, he'd bring it anyway. He's that type of coach. Nobody's going to tell him what to do, I don't think. No, look, that's just how he is. He said when the bracket was revealed, he said, I took about 30 seconds to appreciate it, and then let's go. It's like that's just how. I asked one of the guys from JMU, James Carpenter, that had been with him his whole tenure at JMU and now obviously at Indiana. I was like, in any point during that 5-6 years did he let his guard down? He's like, well, we went to New Orleans for the Sun Belt Media Days, and we had dinner with him, and he was a little more relaxed, and that was it in 6 years. And so that's just how this guy is. It works. I mean, he's that motivated. Like he's talking about a story I'm going to write this week about how they reshaped their red zone offense and had the best red zone offense basically in the country in terms of like touchdown percentage and best of his career. He spent like 3 years watching film to do these things. Like, I mean, that's just like his head. That's where his headspace is at, and that's just how focused and locked in and motivated he is.
What about the Nick Saban aspect of his? Obviously, he's referenced it, but where do you see the impact of and the blueprint of Nick Saban's unmatched career? I guess it was 4 years together, including Nick Saban's first championship at Alabama. That Cignetti was a key part of the recruiting coordinator. Almost a reinvention of his career, because I look back, as you already have this memorized, but listeners may not know. He spent the big chunk of the first part of this millennium at NC State, and that Chuck Amato regime ended up getting blown out and fired, and he did have Phillip Rivers as part of the gig there. And a lot of losses for a guy who said, Google me. I did some Googling, and the assistant coach version of pre-Saban, the assistant coach version of Kurt Cignetti's life is filled with losing. Because it's not all his fault. He's on these staffs, but Rice and Pitt and Johnny Majors at the end there at Pitt, it wasn't good. But then Saban, he really paid attention, it seems to me. So where do you almost hear echoes of Saban when this guy talks?
Well, I think that he always, he said, he's told me that he always wanted to be a head coach, and so that. I think that's what he always had his eye towards. And Nick Saban, I think, taught him, he references blueprint a lot, his blueprint for success, his blueprint for a team. And I think that sort of advanced under Nick Saban, that, how to hire an assistant coach, what you're looking for in a staff, how to sort of, balance your time and how to sort of run a team. I think a lot of that came from Nick Saban. He's called it kind of a graduate level course. And so I think that's what really shaped him there. I think he's always sort of had, a bit of gifted offensive mind. I mean, worked with, like you said, Phillip Rivers, worked with Russell Wilson. He was just very good with, skill players too, has worked with receivers. That's what he was known for at Alabama. But in terms of quarterbacks, was gifted as well. And so I think that, the two collided. Once he got with Saban, he kind of really felt comfortable with the idea of how to build a program. And you saw him do that right away at IUP, which was a very tough job. He told me that the coaches on the staff were unionized at the time when he took over. I mean, imagine dealing with that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just a different world down there. But he did it. And then he did it at Elon, a place that really had a track record similar to IU, where it just couldn't win. And he just came in and said, look, I have an identity, I have a plan, and we're going to execute it. So I think that's what you saw with Nick Saban, where he learned, how to build that and take it with him.
Michael, any idea as to what the fan turnout for IU might be up here on Friday night?
I think it's an interesting question. I think fans, there might be more Indiana fans outside the stadium than in, just to come to experience it, to tailgate. But in terms of obviously you all have seen the ticket prices. I mean, they're really expensive. That is a roadblock, obviously. But I think that there are going to be fans that pay the price just because it's, right now, Kurt Cignetti is going to say this is not a once in a lifetime experience, but for them, as of right now, it is.
It is.
Having never been there. So I think there will be a good turnout. I think you see on social media people say, we're going to tailgate at a minimum. So I think you'll feel, the fans' presence there. But I'm interested to see, how many bought tickets, how many were available to sort of, buy, just because, like you said, the prices, were so much higher than the rest of the first, 4 first-round games.
Wonder about we're obsessed with the weather here, but that final home game against Purdue, blowout, that the conditions look pretty miserable. I have not seen the temperature. I don't know if you remember just how much did it impede their passing game, Indiana's passing game at all? It certainly didn't impede their ability to get to 66 points, but is there something, an advantage if this thing dips into the 20s as their forecast? Jackson Neal's forecasting team here promising
Storm Team 16.
Sub-freezing temps, maybe a couple inches of snow.
I don't remember promising. I just remember saying.
Seems like that's advantage Notre Dame, even though they're both, Midwestern teams, because Notre Dame, I think, seems like more apt to be able to win this thing, throwing 8 passes in the game might be a good idea anyway, than Indiana would be.
Yeah, I mean, they played, there was snow kind of steady, it was not just like a sprinkle or something like that. I mean, it was steady snow throughout that, I think the first 3 quarters, essentially. It was cold. There was wind too. So, I mean, they did get experience with that during that game. And obviously, like you said, they weren't afraid to throw the ball. They didn't veer from their offensive plan. I mean, it was basically what you saw the rest of the season. Like you said, I mean, the narrative usually is, teams that can run well, are favored in lower temperatures, just because, sometimes ball's a little heavier, harder to throw, and can impact you. But, this team, played in it, looked good. And I don't expect that, necessarily, they've got a good short to intermediate passing game where I think a lot of teams kind of get scared away from doing the things that they do in weather, but, like short slants, getting stuff out to their slot receivers. I still think a lot of that would work even in inclement weather. So I don't think that it'd be as much of a disadvantage for them, as normally like a team that just like air raid offense is going downfield. Indiana's not built that way. They can really take advantage of some stuff that, I think would be doable in the snow.
One final question from a personal standpoint. I know you, as writers, we get into these grooves where you just sit there and grind, and you're writing and you're interviewing and you're going here and you're going there. How many times this week, or how many times in the last couple of weeks, do you just sit there and think, am I really going to cover a college football playoff game at Notre Dame Stadium? I'm covering IU football instead of writing about whether or not Mike Woodson makes it back to the NCAA tournament this year. Like, has it sunk in that you're still covering football on December 17th?
Yeah, I think I think it hit you when you kind of the college football playoff banner to this week when they had all the press conferences instead of the team banner. It's like didn't expect to see that kind of behind all these people in December as you're kind of preparing to write about a bowl game or the postseason. Yeah, I mean I think certainly it's an amazing run. I mean what they've done, and there's really very little historical precedent in terms of, there's been maybe I think 5 or 6 teams with this big of a win turnaround in college football history. I mean, that says you've been pretty bad too, right? Like, I mean, you had to kind of come out from the depths. So, but it really is, it does feel at times that this was a totally new team, in terms of, having Kurt Cignetti, all the new faces. And I thought it was interesting that one of the JMU guys said, well, we would have been here if we would all stayed at JMU. We would run it back and been here. And so I think it's not really been a pinch me moment for them, because it's like, well, yeah, we were really good last year and we still are. So it's just an interesting dynamic that, Tom Allen's team that was really, really bad last year is just not here anymore. It's just a new team. And I think that's the new age of college football where, I think teams with the right people in charge can do this now.
Okay,
Because the rules have allowed you to put the roster like that.
I lied. One more. You got a prediction for us for Friday?
I'm leaning toward. I got to write it here this afternoon, but I'm leaning towards Indiana. I don't know. I feel like, the strength on strength. Obviously, you've seen the rush defense numbers. You've seen the rush offense, the rushing offense numbers for Notre Dame. I think the X factor is the fact that I don't know when Notre Dame's faced a really good passing offense, they've really struggled this year. USC, I thought kind of laid the blueprint. And I think that there's some chance that, Indiana can get going offensively and we've seen them play with a lead and play really well. I think if they can jump out to a lead on Friday night, that this could be their game.
There you go. Michael, thanks for your time. Safe travels up here on Friday. We'll see you at late night Friday night at Notre Dame Stadium.
Well, when we do this for the first round next year, I'll wear a tie.
Thank you.
We'll hold you to it. And I went really, really old on this one. I just feel like I wanted to get some of this info because I went down this rabbit hole and I just kept going and going and going. I'm like, I have to use this. So the pot of old this week, December 2nd, 1944. Friday is the third time in Notre Dame Stadium history the Irish will play a home game in December. On December 2nd, 1944, Notre Dame played the first ever home game in December in Notre Dame Stadium history. Notre Dame beats Great Lakes Naval Training 28-7. So they avenged the loss the previous year to Great Lakes when they lost 19-14 in a game played at Old Comiskey Park in Chicago.
School Field.
No, not School Field. Comiskey Park in Chicago. 1944, the Irish finished 8-2, 1 year after winning their fifth national championship in 1943 when they went 9-1. And the South Bend Tribune, that bastion of Notre Dame football coverage, reported for the 1944 game, it was a chilled crowd playing on a frozen, dry field. Temperatures the morning of that game were 12 degrees, and the stadium needed more than 24 volunteers to clear 4 to 6 inches of snow from the field, the seats, and the aisles. Notre Dame football head coach that year, Ed McKeever, in his only season after taking over for legendary Frank Leahy. Hugh DeVore followed Ed McKeever in 1945. The team captain in 1944. Mike, any guess?
Jack Kaiser.
Not Jack Kaiser. Jack Kaiser was not playing football in 1944.
3 more years.
It seems like
later.
What year? 1944?
1944.
Yeah, a little off to get Riley Leonard's Jim Curran.
Yes.
No, I don't know who you got.
The team captain in 1944
Johnny Lou Jack.
was Pat Philly, a South Bend, Indiana native. He was a 2-time team captain, including the 1943 national championship game. Consensus All-American at left guard in 1943 and a second-team All-American in 1944. He was going to miss the 1944 season because he was called up to serve in the Marines after 1943. But Pat Philly received a medical discharge from the Marines because of bad knees sustained during his high school and college football playing careers. So he returns to South Bend, has surgery on his knees at St. Joseph Hospital, and then returned to Notre Dame to play his senior season in 1944. And his return, I don't think Mike Berdino would write this about if Ashton Craig returned to the offensive line. But it said his return, according to the South Bend Tribune, would, quote, give the offensive line some most unexpected strength. Pat Philly spent 29 seasons in coaching and athletic administration at Cornell University. He's a member of the Cornell Athletics Hall of Fame, and he died of bone cancer in 2000 at the age of 77. So that's our pot of old.
May I just interject? 'Cause I didn't read the show notes.
See, he's fascinated by something I said when he had it in print, 2 days ago?
I like to be surprised by some of this
Was I
research.
surprised?
What a
Did it
waste of
surprise
effort,
you?
though. What a waste of effort. That was the first of the 3 December home games. Why not just take us back to December 5th, 2020? Syracuse, Ian Book threw an interception ending a long streak without one, and that was right here at Notre Dame. Am I imagining that?
Who does what? But what's the significance of
Who was the
December
captain of-
2020?
COVID, the COVID year, the COVID season.
What does that have to do with anything?
Huh? The first game they played in December of 1944.
The first game
Was that-
ever in December.
Yeah, but that wasn't against Notre Dame. That wasn't against Indiana. That was
No,
Great
it
Lakes.
wasn't. It was Great
I'm
Lakes.
just telling you, you wasted your effort and you lost me at 1944. We've done all that. We had 2 service academies. We helped guys sell books. We're done with that. 4 years ago, folks, Notre Dame had to play a home game in September, then had to turn around and play the ACC championship game 2 weeks later against Clemson in Charlotte, and then turned around 13 days later, played Alabama, lost both those. That's a lot of activity in amid a pandemic, mind you.
It's Mike Berardino bucking to do the next pot of old on our next pot of old.
That's not my bag.
Pot of gold show. So, Mike Berardino, always good to hear your opinion on that. Easiest segment of the show. Mike Berardino will find some way to complicate it, though.
I will. That's my job.
One hot take, one prediction. You want to go?
Nope.
You've already
Passed.
Why?
I don't have a hot
Have you
take.
ever gone
I
first?
want to have
I
a
don't think
memorable
so.
hot take, and I don't want anybody to copy my hot take.
Just throw out the
I
75-yard
don't want
punt by James
anybody-
Rendell, and then you're good.
That's yours. We're
That's
saving
good.
that one up.
All right, Jackson.
My turn?
Best dressed
Hot take.
Jackson. You get to go first. Hot take and prediction.
All right, I'm going to go for my hot take. I think Notre Dame gets 3 interceptions of Curtis Rourke. He threw 2 against Maryland earlier this year. He's been really careful with the football, only throwing 4 all season. This is a next level Notre Dame defense. I think you saw with the Christian Gray and Xavier Watts interceptions against USC. This is a defense that can just turn the ball over. I think Golden spent a couple of these extra couple of weeks drawing up some things. I think they get 3 interceptions, and if they're going to get 3 interceptions, they're going to put up 31 points. Indiana will put up 21. So Notre Dame 31-21 is my prediction.
There you go. I will go with the tight ends. Will have the most productive day that they've had all season. I don't know if this is going to be a wide receiver game, a Bo Collins game, or a Jaden Greathouse game. It's Mitchell Evans. It's Eli Raridan. It's Cooper Flanagan. And it's also going to be a game played close to the offensive vests. Notre Dame 21, Indiana 13. I just can't see Notre Dame kicking a field goal. I know what Marcus Freeman has said about Mitch Jeter. He's the healthiest this, he's the healthiest that. We saw him kicking in practice yesterday, and he banged one off the upright from 35, was it?
Yeah.
Was it 30, around 30? So I'm going a low-scoring game. Notre Dame's not kicking a field goal, 21-13.
That's the score I've already submitted. Austin Huff can
So
can
we've
attest.
we submitted
We have the
both
exact
same
score.
I submitted mine on Sunday.
Yeah, okay.
You had
I
the
wasn't-
chance to
I
go
was
first right
unaware.
here.
You did.
I did. That's the score. I'm not copying you. It's a great score prediction. It means it'll not be anywhere close to that.
The
But
fact that Mike and I are thinking alike, I'm leaving right now. Forget that. We're on the same wavelength. Whoa.
so, going into the USC game, my hot take was that Mitch Jeter would make a field goal, and he didn't. But I'm going to go a little safer on this. Cold temperatures, special teams breakdowns at Ohio State for Indiana. I'm seeing a Bryce Young blocked punt in this game, and Notre Dame I don't know if he'll be the one to get the touchdown, but I think Notre Dame gets a score off of special teams and punt block Bryce Young, another one. I see that just unblockable, that guy in the wingspan. But 21-13 because yes, it will be a bit of a snowball fight, and that just feels about right. And that even if they let Cignetti bring that chip into the stadium, I think that Notre Dame is up to the challenge again. I don't think their season is done in this at home, and for all we know, that this is the first of 4 more to watch, and that's where I'm at.
So according to Mike Berardino, we're doing a podcast next week to preview Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Right?
I like the sound of that.
There you go. So
Sure, yeah.
we may or may not be back next
All
week.
3 of us picked Notre Dame to win.
We did.
So that we would do a podcast. Yeah.
So, well, we don't know because they haven't played yet. So we pick them to win. What if they lose? Maybe we'll
Entirely
be back
possible.
next week. Maybe we won't. There will be a pot of gold eventually, sometime maybe in December. For Mike, for Jackson, I'm Tom. This is Pot of Gold. Let's see what happens. Notre Dame, IU, Friday night, 8 p.m., Notre Dame Stadium, the first ever college football playoff game. Time to go.
This has been the South Bend Tribune's Pot of Gold podcast. your home for insightful Notre Dame football coverage and analysis.